Hello and welcome to Inside Exercise. I'm Emeritus Professor Glenn McConell from Victoria University in Australia. I've just finished the talk that I've been looking forward to since before I even started this podcast. The first person I invited was Professor David Costill from Ball State University, who's just a legend. He's 87 now, just had a fantastic talk. I was just going to keep talking as long as he talks, so this is the longest one so far. Just an absolute legend of exercise physiology and human performance. Started the Human Performance Lab in 1965, went right through to the 1990s. Just a huge name in exercise physiology, the nicest guy out there. So we talked about his research, how he got into research, his swimming. So he's been really remarkable swimmer. And even now at 87, he just stopped competing last year. He still goes 3 days a week and does interval training. He has 4 world records for his age group, but just his phenomenal influence on exercise physiology. It's literally, if you look at the people that he's had through the lab at Ball State, it's the who's who. And indeed, I think 6 or 7 of the people I've had on this podcast have studied originally with David Costill. So just the nicest guy, the sharpest guy, just a phenomenal person. And I love him to death, to be honest. So stick around, I think you'll enjoy it. Hi, Dave, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to see you.
Oh my gosh. You know, I don't know if you know, but you're actually the reason I started this podcast. You're the first person I asked to come on this podcast. And as you know, I didn't give up.
Yeah, I think it was a while back.
Yeah. And I think you know, of course you know, that exercise metabolism book I put together. So you're on the first chapter, the history chapter with Andy Coggan. And that was when I was putting that book together, and I thought, hang on. And actually, the funny thing was, I thought that was going to be an ebook. They kept calling it an ebook, but it's a hardcover book as well. You know, this hardcover. And
so they make it into a hardcover.
Oh, they did.
Book?
Actually, I'm going to send you, because you know what they gave the corresponding author of each chapter got a book, a hardcover book. And I didn't even think about, because Andy must have got it. So I'm going to send you, because they gave me 3.
Yeah,
I'm going to send you.
Sure he did the work, so you could let him have it.
Yeah, but anyway, so the first chapter is Coggan and Costill, and that's beautiful as well, because you know he did his studies with you, and he ended up being the first person on the podcast after you. So anyway, so I was doing that exercise metabolism book, and I thought, hang on, if it's an ebook, surely I could actually interview the people, you know, that are on each chapter, and could make that an added sort of bonus. And then I thought, well, why keep it just to the ebook? Why don't make it more general? And I was like, and I'd seen that, you know, there's that American Physiological Society put together those interviews with Carmen Wasserman and stuff.
Right.
And I was like, hang on, where's the David Costill one? Because that was, you know, all physiology, not just exercise. And I thought, okay, I'm going to interview you. That's the first thing I'm going to do, you know, if you're okay to. Anyway, here you are. Mm-hmm.
Well, good to have a chance to chat with you for a bit.
Oh, yeah. And as soon as I put it up on Twitter, I don't think you're on Twitter, but I didn't used to do Twitter.
No, I'm not on Twitter.
Fair enough, too. As soon as I put it up on Twitter, just bang, 120 people, like you tick their thumbs up and all this sort of stuff. So people were excited for me to have a chat to you.
Well, that's good.
All right. You're a legend of exercise physiology, and I was lucky enough to study with you. So that was way back in 1989 to 1991. We've got a few stories there that might come out. But I have to think, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking Frank Pyke, what a good man. So you remember Frank Pyke? Why don't you just tell us a bit? Because he died like two years ago.
Well, Frank spent most of a year in the lab. And so he and I were very close friends. So I was just very saddened when he passed away.
Yeah, and is it true that he was the first Australian to play in the NFL? He was like the kicker for the Dallas Cowboys.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
He was a kicker.
Yeah.
Dallas Cowboys, I think.
Yeah, because he's Australian football, you know, Aussie rules football, and he was, you know, they could kick. These guys could kick, and when I think they tried him out. It's like, holy crap! This guy can kick. So anyway, the point there was I did my undergraduate at Wollongong University, human movement science, so like sports science and exercise science. And I thought later on, I was like, what a good guy, because I did pretty well. I was conscientious. I worked hard.
Yeah.
And when I said I wanted to go on and do the full deal, the PhD and become an academic, he straight away said, go and work with David Costill, which is pretty selfless, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was just, wow. That was just the
Yeah,
best.
well, it's funny how things connect.
Yeah. And then I didn't know at that point. I knew your name, but I didn't realize I'd get back here, and then I'd be doing my PhD with Mark Hargraves, who also studied with you. And then
that's right.
7 or 8 of the people I've had on the podcast have studied with you originally. So
yeah, it's interesting to follow the careers of all the people that have come through the lab.
you obviously selected people that were pretty good, but then they obviously ended up really good. So you naturally were doing something right.
No, the key to success is to surround yourself with talented people and then get out of the way.
It's funny. Anyway, all right. So this is great to have you on, hey. So much to talk about. So obviously your career. I'm interested in how you actually got started, why you even thought, to do. I often ask people, were you a sports person first, then you wanted to do research, or were you a researcher first? I know the answer with you. I guess I'm just interested, how did you get started? And then how did you end up at Ball State, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't start out in science. My undergraduate degree in college was physical education. And that meant I got very minimal science experience, the typical anatomy and physiology, which didn't really excite my curiosity about research. And it really wasn't until I went to work on my master's degree that I took a course that was taught by a physiologist that worked for NASA. And he kind of got me to do a little project and taught me a little bit about the science aspect. But then when I finished with my master's degree, I went and taught public school, teaching basic science to junior high school kids and some physiology, biology to high school.
Whereabouts was that? Like which state?
Well, I started in Fremont, Ohio, which is a little tiny town, but I was more interested in the coaching aspect than the teaching at that time. But then I moved a year later to Cleveland, and I coached swimming there. And after 2 years of coaching, I realized that I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. And so I applied to Ohio State to do my doctorate. And it was at Ohio State where I really got exposed to a exercise phys lab because they had started one a year or two earlier. And so after
who was your supervisor there?
DK Matthews, a guy with a lot of talent that could have really gone places, but he had other issues, personal issues that sort of prevented him.
Was that Fox and Matthews or not? Was that the Fox and Matthews?
Yeah,
No.
well, yeah. And I was a student with Ed Fox and Dick Bowers and Fritz Hagerman. And so I got exposed through those guys because they'd already been there a year or two. And I got introduced to their projects and suddenly found that it was really lots of fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was like a hobby.
Yeah, Ohio State was like really a big, I remember hearing about that when I was thinking about going to the US. Ohio State was really one of the places to go.
Yeah, they had the potential to really move it, but then that was it was low key. It was not really a big deal.
Okay.
And that was in about 1963, 64. And I was there for 1 year, and Matthews, my advisor, called me in one day and said, there's a job open that you ought to consider. And I said, I've only been here like 9 months, and I hadn't done that much in terms of academics. And so he got me to take a job at the State University of New York in Cortland, a small college, Division III. And I went up there and was going to coach cross country, coach swimming, and teach physiology. So I took the job, and I had great runners. I mean, I had to get the runners out of the student body just because they had no team. They hadn't won a meet in like 7 years, and I recruited just ambient talent. And turned out to be that at the end of the first year, 3 of them were all Americans.
Wow! What, in 1 year as well? How'd you do that?
Well, what happened was one guy had been 3rd in the state in high school, but didn't want to run it in college. So I kind of convinced him to at least run cross country. And he ended up finishing the first year, finished 3rd in the nationals.
Wow.
The second guy was Bob Fixx.
Oh man.
And Fixx had never run before. He'd been in the military and just decided when he came to college, well, he had trouble getting into college, but when he got in, he was a straight A student. But he ended up the second year winning the nationals in cross country. And the third guy was a football player that decided he didn't want to get his head crushed. So he decided he'd pick another sport. And it turned out he was a natural. So I had 3 guys that were so good that in cross country, if you can finish 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, nobody can beat you. So I had these 3 guys, and they just ran together in competition. And
hang on. So what did you do with them? Was that when everyone was into intervals, like twice a day, and that sort of Bob Shaw type stuff back then? Or?
Well, we were doing once a day workouts, but Fixx, Bob Fixx would sneak off and do an extra workout or 2.
Okay.
So I had trouble controlling them, but they were just naturals and great to coach. So I went there as.
If I could just push that a little bit, I'm just interested because we've just had a whole bunch of people on a row. We had Michael join us saying all roads lead to Rome in terms of how you end up, and I've had Andy Coggan talking about training, and we've been talking a lot about training philosophies. I'm just wondering back then, what were you doing with them mainly?
Well, at that time, the philosophy on distance running was volume.
Yes. The Lydia. Yeah.
And so, they were doing, I would have guys doing maybe 30 miles a week, but I introduced some speed work. So they started doing repeat 400-meter runs and stuff. Now you have to realize this is 1966.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was in an era when, quality work really wasn't done much.
Yeah.
Most of it was just putting in the mileage.
It's interesting you say that, because after Lydiard, I saw something about him, and he basically was saying he just grabbed the local guys and trained them, and it's similar. You grabbed the local guys and trained them, and they ended up doing really well. So, and I wonder how much of it, he said, it seemed like part of it was just they had the faith in the coach, and it's almost like whatever you did, because they had the faith in the coach or whatever.
Well,
And they were consistent, you know what I mean?
well, you have to remember, I was very close to their age.
Yeah.
I was only like 28.
And you're running with them, or?
No, Bob Fitz always tells a funny story that when he met with me the first time, I said, we're going to go out and run this afternoon at 3:00. And he assumed that I was going to run with him. So we meet to run, and I'm sitting in a 1962 Corvette. And what I did was they would run behind me. And so I'm blowing fumes,
Maybe hypoxic training.
And we had one route that was, we do repeat real steep incline run, and I would start at the bottom in the Corvette, and I'd go up to the top, and they'd try to stay with me, and then I'd back down, and we'd do it again.
That's great.
And so Fitz would always tell that story, how I showed up in the Corvette.
Actually, tell me, because you've ended up, I want to talk later on, especially about your swimming prowess and how you're still going out there. Because I had Scott Trappy on a few weeks ago, and he said 3 days a week or something, you guys are down the pool smashing it out.
Yeah.
Like 87 now.
Yeah, we did the same workout Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and most weeks I'll put in just an easy day, but I've also been doing other stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I'll never forget, you were you're 87 now. You were 78 when you came to. Remember, you came to Victoria University that day, and I managed to get you in the pool, and I managed to get your approval to get in the pool. And you were just like smashing it up there. I couldn't believe it. And I was so annoyed because my phone used to always be maxed out. And I was like trying to delete stuff so I could videotape you. And I got like sort of like half a lap of you doing freestyle, just perfect form. But then my phone was maxed out when you did like 150, 200 meters of butterfly. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah, I was.
Sorry. That's why I'm just saying I couldn't believe you were just smashing it out. And then you got out of the pool. And you said, oh, my back is so bad, I can't use my legs at all. It's just all arms. I'm like, hang on, how could you even do that?
Yeah, my swimming was, even in butterfly, was just all upper body. Because well, not that, I'm not a very good kicker. I have small feet. I don't have the nice flipper advantage that guys like Phelps and others have.
Wow. All right, so we'll get back to that later, but I'm interested that because I feel like your main thing you wanted to be was a runner, yeah. But then can you explain? Because I felt like you wanted to be a runner, and then you went up to swimming, or was it the other way around?
Well, what happened was since I'd coached these guys, I kind of had an affinity to be a runner. I wanted to be a runner, but it was pretty quickly exposed to me that I didn't have the talent, but I still wanted to run. So I started running the year that I left Cortland and moved to Ball State. So, but you have to realize at that time, nobody over college age ran. I mean, there were no joggers. We're talking 1966.
Before the running boom. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally before. So if
no one ran unless you were getting chased or something.
Yeah. I mean, it was very common, you got harassed all the time if you were out running. So
they just didn't get it. What would they even say? It's hard to imagine because my whole life there's been runners. They just think you're a lunatic, or what are they? Remember they used to say only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun or something. What were they just wouldn't know what was going on? Or they thought you were getting chased?
The general public?
Yeah, like what did they think? Like why were they harassing? What were they just didn't know what you were doing? Or?
Well, they didn't. The whole exercise thing was, just not appreciated at all. It wasn't until Ken Cooper and George Sheehan and some of those guys came along that, and of course, Frank Shorter's success and the popularity began to pick up. But I always had the laugh because I'd go to a cocktail party someplace, and all the men would sort of get together and be talking, and I was always puzzled by the fact that all the guys would ask me, all they wanted to talk about was my running.
Oh,
they weren't running, but they were curious about my running. Okay. And so I'd say, well, if you want to run, you can join us at noon. And we gradually accumulated a bunch of people. You remember Bud Getchell?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Bud had a group, and then it expanded, and so we had a noontime running group. But it kind of triggered because I started running. It kind of triggered my interest in why I wasn't very good. I wanted to know why I wasn't very good and why other guys were just sort of naturally talented. And so I guess the first studies I did were really on characterizing runners.
It was all about you, huh?
What?
It was all about you, trying to work out why you weren't any good.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And so a lot of my studies were just descriptive, characterizing the talents. And so that's when we brought in 1968 or 69. In 68, I decided to go study the Olympic marathon trials in Alamosa, Colorado. And so that ended up being a fairly major publication, along with, I think we published in Journal of Applied Physiology, a lot of the characteristics. And in those days, you could use the initials of who they were. So we had guys, the general public may not recognize the names, but we had Amby Burfoot, who won 68 Boston Marathon. Yeah. And guys of that caliber. And so we brought them in and we did studies on them, and did max VO2s and all kinds of long runs with them. I had studies where I had them doing 2-hour treadmill runs at race pace. And we had Derek Clayton.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you had the physiology of a world champion marathoner in equals one, Derek Clayton, 1969. Wow, that's amazing stuff. And it's funny you say Andy Burford, because I sometimes when someone subscribes to my YouTube channel, it'll tell me. It doesn't always tell me. And it said Andy Burford subscribed to my YouTube channel.
Yeah, he was great. He was a mainstay of my studies. He and Hal Higdon and Edwin Rowe and Ted Corbett, and I just had a group of guys that I could fly them in and use them for subjects. So
and Andy Burford ended up Runner's World editor and for years.
He's still active. I mean,
by this time you were obviously at Ball State. So we kind of you went Cortland, and then how did the Ball State job come along?
After a couple of years of coaching, when I did my dissertation, I did it at Cortland, because remember I said I'd only been at Ohio State for 1 year.
Yes.
So I ended up having to create a project and conduct the study at Cortland.
I guess I missed that. So I thought you meant you were an academic. So you were it's just a student at the time. I did. And you got a job at Cortland as a PhD student.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
in addition to coaching two sports, teaching physiology,
And you
I was working on my dissertation.
And you came up with it yourself. It was your own.
Yeah, I had to come up with it.
You supervise yourself.
Yeah. So I had to ask my advisor. I gave him 20 different topics of ideas, and I didn't hear from him.
Well, he's probably bamboozled there.
Yeah, I thought, well, God, I'm never going to get to do a study. So I called him up and I asked him, I said, I've sent you these possible projects. Which ones should I do? And he said, oh, hell, do any one you want. So since I had the swimming pool available, I did a project in the pool using different water temperatures. That's a whole story by itself, because I had to change the temperature of an entire swimming pool and collect all the data in a weekend. So and it was wild, but I got that study done. But it interested me. The whole process interested me because in order to do the study, I had to get grant money. And so I learned how to write a research grant. And then collect the data, analyze it, do all the writing and everything. I did that in 1 year.
And I guess you probably didn't have much equipment either.
Oh, I didn't have any equipment. So I had to get the grant in order to get the equipment.
And this is all during your PhD. And students complain now if you haven't got funding for something. No, I shouldn't say that. It was just different back then, I guess. Oh.
Well, it wasn't easy, and I was very stressed in doing the whole project. But I had students that would help me, and I collected the data, wrote it all up, sent it in to have it reviewed, and had not many changes. So it ended up I was able to graduate the next year.
Oh man. Let's just indicate that again. So you were doing your PhD, you had no equipment, you had to come up with your own ideas, you supervise yourself, plus teach, plus coach swimming and running. So did you sleep much?
No.
Oh, right. And this just reminds me, because I don't want to forget later, is it correct? Because I was told that at the start at Ball State, you used to do an all-nighter. You'd go to work, I think, Wednesday morning, and then you'd come back Thursday night and you just overnight. Is that not correct?
No. I put in crazy hours. I mean, I'd go to work say on Monday at I'd be in there by 6:30 or 7, and I'd work until 5, and I'd go home and have dinner. And then I'd go back to the lab until midnight.
Right.
And I did that day after day after day. I don't know why Judy didn't leave me. I was crazy, but it was so much fun. I was building the lab from scratch. I mean, I had zero equipment, and so
we're jumping around. Luckily, your brain is probably still sharper than mine, because we're jumping around a little bit. So you're at Cortland. It's me causing the jumping around.
Yeah.
You're at Cortland and you had no equipment. So you got that done somehow. And then how did you end up at Ball State? How did that come along? And I know you only had like a broom cupboard for a lab there, right?
Well, again, I had realized that I wanted to do research, and coaching just took too much time, and there was no facility at Cortland. So I decided it was time to try to find a place where I could do research. Okay. And so I applied, to a number of places and was offered jobs at a number of different places.
No wonder.
But I had no track record. I mean, I was just an unknown. But it came down to 2 possible jobs. One was Washington State University, but they already had a guy that was directing the lab by the name of Phil Gollnick.
Oh, there you go. That's a big name.
And I knew that, we'd hit heads if I went there. So Ball State offered me a job. And the ideal part about that was they didn't have any equipment, no expectations. And of course I had no track record. So they probably took me because I had just a little bit more than they expected, which
I think
wasn't
they could
much.
see a bit of promise there. I think someone that's done everything you did. I think they could see a work ethic and a bit of a can-do kind of guy there.
I don't know. I was just a bit of a workaholic in a sense, but
Oh man.
I liked.
Sorry, David, cut out again. What were you saying there about the move to Ball State?
Well, the fact that I found Ball State to be more compatible with what I really wanted to do ended up being a real fortuitous move. And so in 1966, when I moved there, all they had was an old storeroom, which was about 25 by 25 feet. Okay. And no equipment. But they gave me a startup package of $9,500, which I could buy a little.
Is that quite a lot back then? Like how much
That
was your
that was enough that I could get an old used EKG, a stationary bike, and a Quinton treadmill.
Okay.
All right. So
But no
I had
gas
that.
analysis. No. Yeah.
Well, I did get some Douglas bags from Ohio State. They didn't know that I acquired them, but I had hoses, but I didn't have the analyzers. I had to use a Haldane technique for all the gas analysis, and so I was able to get a Haldane. So I had the basic stuff gradually acquired over the first year. And so then I was able to start doing some basic treadmill work and different odd sorts of studies.
Oh, tell me, when was that? I keep thinking about this. When was that you ran a marathon? Because I know temperature regulation and running was some of your early stuff. When was it that you ran a marathon with a glass thermometer and you kept every 10K, you stuck it up your...
Oh, I did that a couple times. One was Honolulu. I ran, but I used to run with a Yellow Springs rectal probe wrapped around me, and we would just plug it in. We did all this temperature regulation stuff. Again, that was with runners because that was a problem that runners had, was hyperthermia. And so it was natural to develop projects that dealt with that, and dehydration. And so I dealt initially with running studies.
Yes. All right. So, and when you were so busy in Cortland, and then I'm assuming in Ball State as well, getting everything going, were you still trying to be a runner then, or a swimmer? Like, when were you getting time to do any of your own stuff, or were you not really doing much then?
Well, I ran, more or less for fitness, 4 or 5 miles a day, every day. And the guys that I hung out with would do the same, but we never thought about competing or trying to enter races. There really weren't any races except the big ones. You couldn't find a local race because nobody had any races. So it wasn't until probably around 68 or 69 that I started running. But I would always finish in the middle of the crowd.
This probably isn't going to work out very well, but this is, look at this shirt. This is from it's because of the virtual screen, it gets all silly.
I think you hold it back some.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Man. Anyway, it says the lab. Maybe if I go.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, it says the lab, Human Performance Lab, Ball State University. There it is. And that's
Yeah,
for
right there.
19, that was the 1990, you had that get together reunion thing, 25 years of the lab. And even then, like the legacy, yeah. Was it 99? I thought it was written on there. Anyway, I've managed to keep that, and it was a good quality shirt.
Yeah.
It was 1990, and that was amazing because that was when it was such good timing when I was there. I was there 1989 to 1991, so I was in the old lab. Okay, not the old lab. No, not the broom cupboard, but the lab you had till 1990.
You were there when in the second lab.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then
the
you
first
moved to the new one. Okay,
yeah,
first lab.
and that took place in 19. We moved to the outbuildings that we had. We moved there in 73.
73. So you had this,
So
that small, just that one room, or did you expand a bit? That one room until 1973, yeah? And then
yeah,
you had those out rooms or whatever. And then you had the flash, 1990, you moved to the flash one. And that's when you had that reunion and the t-shirts.
yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we moved, and you've already talked to Scott Trappy, so you know he came on right about the time we moved in to that other lab. He came to do his doctorate.
Okay. Yeah. So what do we think about? We're sort of touching on things, but yeah, some your memorable studies. Yeah. So temperature regulation. So why don't you start telling us some of the things you found? I mean, I think we all know because it's just in the textbooks now and whatever. But
well, I mentioned characterizing athletes, working with runners and dehydration and hyperthermia. Those were big events because in 1968, the rules in the marathon were that you had to run every 10K to get any fluids.
Okay.
And so, after running 10K, you've already dehydrated substantially and you're already partly hyperthermic. So those became big problems. And so we spent a lot of time in the early part of the 70s doing that kind of research. But at the same time, we were also doing some studies. Since we had a treadmill and we had an EKG, we started doing some studies on heart disease. So we had a big project, an NIH project, to study middle-aged and older men with what's called latent coronary disease. They have the disease, but they don't know it. And so we spent 3 years doing that while we were doing all the other stuff. So then after that, our interests sort of moved into a variety of topics, nutrition, looking at, in 68, we started doing the biopsy procedure. So I started doing more and more related to nutrition, glycogen depletion. And so there was a lot of nutritional studies done, and I was giving a lot of talks, really dealing with nutrition and running. And George Sheehan and I would end up at putting on a clinic before every marathon, it seemed like. And it got to the point by the mid-70s, there were marathons every weekend. So George and I would sort of travel the circuit, from one marathon to the next, giving clinics. So the popularity of running continued, and with it, we continued to do what we could to kind of analyze the nutritional state and training in runners. So that continued. A variety of different studies were going on. I think we were all over the place. Even the caffeine studies, which got a little notoriety. Unfortunately, I was not looking for an ergogenic aid. What I had gotten into when I was looking at muscle glycogen depletion was a way to spare glycogen use. And I knew that if you could stimulate protein lipase, you could burn more free fatty acids. So I was looking for something that would stimulate that enzyme. And I had read that caffeine had an impact on it. So I experimented with caffeine to see if it would have any impact on glycogen sparing. And so, and of course, we saw the huge increase in performance with caffeine. And I made the mistake.
That was not a plan. That was not.
No.
We thought it might improve performance if it spared glycogen, but not.
Yeah. I was looking for something else and just happened to see. I mean, it became very obvious that because I was giving a placebo and a caffeinated drink. And it became very obvious because it was double blind. I didn't know what they were taking, but it became very obvious that guys were going much longer when they were given caffeine. So, yeah.
So I guess I didn't know that caused a big storm, did it? Because of ergogenic aid or improving. Did that cause a bit of a stink, did it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think anybody runs a marathon without drinking coffee beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. But was it a big sort of controversy at the time?
Well, what happened was I had published the results in Journal of Applied Physiology, but at the same time, I decided, well, I'll just write a soft lay article about how it stimulates endurance performance, and publish it in Runner's World. So I sent them the article, and they said they really liked it. There were a couple parts to it, but they wanted me to sign off authorship on it, and they took it and split it up, and it did a whole article on caffeine and how it enhanced performance. And that immediately got everybody going. And as a matter of fact, I was running a marathon in Buffalo, New York. And right before the race, I was sitting, waiting for the start. And a guy comes up to me and he says, hey, you want some caffeine tablets? Like pushing drugs. Yeah. So that's great. There was a big fuss over it, because I had no intention of it being an ergogenic aid, but it turned out to be.
So, I mean, I was going to say, I told a few people here and there that you were coming on. So I emailed Eddie Coyle, and he said he exemplifies the golden age of exercise physiology. And it does feel like that to me. That was like a golden, feels just amazing. Yeah.
Well, but a lot of the stuff that we were doing was just basic curiosity. It was no big deal. We were kind of having fun with it, and nobody expected much. So whatever you found, you could. I generally would publish a study in, say, Journal of Applied Physiology or ACSM journal or something. But then But in addition, I would always try to write a lay article. I always felt it wasn't worth doing the research if you just get squirreled away in some scientific journal and never used. And so I published a lot of lay publications, and that gained probably more notoriety to exercise physiology than all the stuff that we published in the high paid journals.
It looks like you were way ahead of the game, because I remember, we'd be doing our studies and publishing it, and the university would be saying you've got to translate your research, and we were like, oh, how do we do that? So, you were doing that right back then as well. Translate it to the population, which.
Well, we were lucky because Runner's World was just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was studying runners, it was an obvious place to share the research with the running community. And to top it all off, there was a freelance writer, Hal Higdon, and Hal wrote for Runner's World.
Okay.
You didn't lock up, did you?
Well, something happened. I don't know. Did I just freeze up for you, or something happened then?
Yeah.
Is it okay now? Or? All right. How Higdon?
Well, anyway,
yeah.
I was saying about the dissemination of information. I really have to credit guys like Jim Fixx, who wrote a very successful textbook. Absolutely. And one whole chapter was, about research that we were doing. So he had come to the lab, and he and I talked about running and all that. So he published that. And then Hal Higdon was publishing Runner's World stuff and other magazines about the lab. So the popularity of the lab grew because of these publications and the fact that we were traveling and giving talks. And so we got a lot of exposure at a time when exercise physiology was unknown. I mean, nobody knew what it was. And
you were making it happen, obviously. You didn't, when you were busy, you didn't have to write those articles to Runner's World. You obviously. So I'm hoping that helped with funding, and because I couldn't believe when I was there at one stage, you said you had an endowed chair. I know this is later, so that means you didn't actually have to apply for grants. Is that right? The Ball family or whatever should be funded.
No, the endowed chair meant that instead of the university having to pay me, a philanthropist
paid. What that meant?
Yeah. So,
I thought it meant you were just getting grant funding. You didn't have to apply for stuff.
No, I had to fight the battles of getting grant money as well. But yeah, that was an experience in itself. Back in the late 60s, nobody knew what exercise physiology was. And I mentioned that I did a study with coronary disease patients. Mm-hmm. Well, and I had no track record. So, but I had spent part of the summer working with DB Dill, Bruce Dill, in the desert. And so when I got the idea of doing this coronary disease project, the university sent me to Washington to meet with the NIH people. So here I show up, and they don't know me from a hole in the wall, and so, but they were very kind. They sat down and listened to my idea, and in the midst of it, I explained what I had been doing. But I mentioned that I worked with Bruce Dill, who was, a giant in the field. Oh. And so when I was leaving their office, they encouraged me to go ahead and submit the proposal. And the woman who was leading me out said, and make sure you mention that you worked with Bruce Dill. Wow. And so I got funded on that project. I wrote it in a weekend, and I got funded with no site visit.
Wow. I have to admit, I don't know. I just know the classic Dill and Costill. So when we do the, for people that don't know, you'd measure the hemoglobin and the hematocrit, and you'd stick it into the Dill and Costill equation, and it would tell you the plasma volume and the blood volume. That's the only bit I didn't know who was I just knew Dill and Costill, and
well, but Bruce Dill was the director of the Harvard Fatigue Lab back in the 20s and 30s.
Oh, I should have known
so
that.
He's really in the US, he's the godfather of exercise physiology.
Oh, it sounds like I should know that. Well, it's funny you say the godfather, because I remember when I was studying with you, people said you were the father of modern exercise physiology, they were saying. So I guess he was the godfather.
There was kind of a period in there where the Harvard Fatigue Lab really did a lot of stuff, but it was prior to World War II. And they did military stuff that was for the military, equipment and nutrition. But then there was a period where there was little or no interest in exercise as a form of research. And so by the time I came along, it was just the right time, right place. And the popularity then increased dramatically.
Yes, but I obviously heard of the Harvard Fatigue Lab, but Bruce Dill, it sounds like I missed the point there. So there was something also about NATEC. Again, I guess, is it NATEC? NATEC? Something. It's a military research. Yeah. Is that part of that military? Yeah.
NATEC was a military research labs, and they were a spin-off of the Harvard Fatigue Lab.
Okay.
Yeah. So
now I'm also interested, because I know you went to Scandinavia with Bengt Saltin, another massive name who died in 2019. Did you learn because that was the Bergstrom, biopsy needle. Did you learn the biopsy technique over there, or as a story?
No, the reason I went to Sweden was that Bengt Saltin knew that I already knew how to do the biopsy, and had done the soleus muscle.
Okay.
And he hadn't done that.
Oh, so it was the other way around.
Well, I had done the vastus lateralis, the gastroc, and the soleus.
Okay.
And I was told years later that the reason I got invited to come there was because Bengt wanted to learn how to do those. Okay. But no, we started doing the biopsies in '68.
Wow. Hang on, so how did that happen? Because I thought it was the Scandinavians that started reintroduced the biopsy needle.
Well, you had Bergstrom and Holtman were from the Karolinska Institute, and they had I wouldn't say reinvented, but they repopularized the Bergstrom needle. The needle was originally used for muscular dystrophy, and they took it and used it to do a couple of glycogen studies. But I happened to be at a meeting in '67, '68, and a guy from Canada, Bert Taylor, had presented a paper on measuring glycogen in muscle, and he had used the biopsy procedure. So I knew him quite well, and I thought, well, hell, if he can do it, I can do it. Yeah. So I went and asked him if he'd show me how to do it. And so I flew to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and watched the guy do the biopsy on me. And then I came back to Indiana, and I taught the local physician how to do it. And after I had some experience, he said, "You just do them and I'll be your medical coverage." And so that's why we were basically allowed to do biopsies. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been allowed to do half of the procedures that I did if it hadn't been for the
You
local.
just made things happen. Yeah, I remember there was, well, probably not meant to say this, but I remember you said something like, in theory, I'm under supervision, but he's just down the road. He's at the end of a phone call or something.
Oh, he when I first started, he was a pathologist, and he had all the best pathology set up and pathology labs. And so he was a runner. So if I wanted to do anything that involved medicine, he would do it and never charge me. He was fantastic. And he only died about a year ago. And he worked with Scott for years.
Scott Traby. Okay.
Yeah, he made things possible. As a matter of fact, the reason I stayed in Muncie was because I could do more things here in Muncie than I could ever do at a medical center. You know, if I was offered jobs at Michigan, Arizona, Berkeley, Texas, and every place I'd go, I'd tell them what I did, and would I be able to do that here? And they'd go, no, you'd have to get a physician to do all this. And I went, I'm not getting a physician to do any of this stuff.
I remember, I'm going to study with this guru legend, David Costill, and it's like, where is he? Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's America's. I couldn't believe it. It would say America's hometown. I was like, why is that? And they say because it's average. It's the most average of any town or something. Yeah. Maybe that's wrong as well. But I remember asking, why are you in Muncie? So anyway, people would come from all over the world. It would be like this melting pot, you know.
Well, a lot of it was Bill Fink used to say that the graduate students all came to Muncie so they could train. Yeah.
Well, I came to study with you. Anyway, I said, what was it? I asked you, why are you in Muncie, Indiana? And you said, oh, no distractions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and they left me alone. I mean, we were out there in that building. Nobody even knew what the hell we were doing, which was probably good. But you make a comment about Ball State. When I went to Sweden, I shared an office with Phil Gollnick, the guy I would have worked with at Washington. And Phil always used to tease me, and he would call Ball State testicle tech.
Oh, I cut out. He would call it testicle tech.
Yeah, Phil Gollnick. We shared an office, and he was always making jokes about Ball State, and he called it testicle tech.
Testicle tech. That's great.
Yeah.
So you said something about if you'd gone there, you would have banged heads or something. So did you guys used to stir each other up a bit or something? Or?
Oh, we got
a big
along.
name.
Huh?
He was a big name as well. Holy mackerel.
Oh yeah, yeah. Phil, I would say Phil was probably the first real serious biochemist in the field of exercise phys. So. Great guy. Unfortunately, he died when he was only about 54, 53.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you said about banging heads or whatever, you were just joking. Because I can't imagine people not getting on with you. It's just a classic, funny. You're just always still are, but so funny. Can I just say a story? You probably don't remember this. But you mentioned Derek Clayton earlier on, so I'll just tell people very quickly. So Derek Clayton had the world record for the marathon, 2:8:33, from 1969 to 1981, until Alberto Salazar broke it.
Yeah.
Just a legend, right? So then, you tested him then, and then you tested all these other guys, and then you were doing that follow-up study. That was Scott Trapp. He was looking at 25 years later. But anyway, so he came down to Australia, and we VO2 max tested Derek Clayton again.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, my mum. And then you went to Sydney, and my mum's in Sydney. You probably don't remember this. So anyway, we went out somewhere, and my mum said, "Oh, David, He's such a wonderful influence on when you try his life. And anyway, I was doing my PhD with Mark Hargreaves. And he said, life? He doesn't deserve a life. He should be back in the lab. So he said, my mum just met you. It was just a classic. I just thought that was just perfect.
Well, I always, I think one of the things that was good about the lab was that I always thought of the students. And they always thought that I was the director and, some special spot.
Yeah.
But I always considered everybody an equal. And when I coached, I always felt I kind of treated my athletes about like my coach treated me, And so I think probably I ran the lab a lot like I would have if I was coaching.
Oh, you know what? I'll never forget. I just love it. I just keep thinking of stuff. Was the first thing you do, you turn up to work. Well, I was doing my master's, turn up to study, research, whatever it was. And the first thing you do is you just go into your office, see an open door, go into your office, we'd all stand around and we'd just talk crap every morning. For like half an hour or something. And it was always Bill Fink. It always came back to Bill Fink.
Yeah.
And we won't even say what characteristic he had. But you always wanted to talk about his.
Yeah. I was the most fortunate hire because I had little or no chemistry training at all. So this is another connection with Phil Gollnick, is because when I came back from Sweden in 72, 73, I hired Bill. And Bill had no science, no science background.
Wasn't he a theologian or something?
He studied theology and English. Those, no science. So, but I needed a technician. And on the spur of the moment, I hired Bill, but then I needed him to learn these new techniques. So I sent him to work with Phil Gollnick.
Oh, is that how it is?
And Phil taught him all the enzyme chemistry and Lowry techniques. And so then Bill came back and he gradually learned how. Bill's a very smart guy. And he learned all the techniques we needed, or if I came up with a new method that I wanted him to be able to do, he would study it, or I'd send him off to study with someone. And he was priceless.
So you just had this tuition or something, because anyone else would have gone, I'll go to the chemistry department, or other people would have thought, I'll go to the biology department or the chemistry department to find someone to be my chemistry guy. How did you think to go with Bill? Just because he was a nice guy and you thought he was sharp, or
Well, he was a runner.
There you go. He had to be a runner.
And he needed a job.
Gee whiz.
Yeah, he and I worked together for 25 years or so, and he retired we retired together.
Oh, you're a team.
And every year I'd ask him, should we retire this year? And he'd go, one more year.
One more year.
Yeah.
Oh man, what great memories. But anyway, we used to joke around. It would always be, we'd go into your office and just talk crap for 30 minutes every morning. So just when we set the scene,
Well, that was always great, because then we could see what we were going to be doing each day. And everybody knew, everybody learned that they needed to be there at that time in the morning, or else they'd be left out.
Miss out. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was always joking about Bill Fink.
Yeah. Well, Bill always used to say that we needed to get bleachers to put in my office so that we could get everybody a place to sit down, because there'd be like 10 or 12 people in the office at one time.
The other
So
thing, I'm picturing you in the office there. I could just totally picture it. Walk past the corridor and there you are.
yeah,
I just picturing how you used to do this thing I just couldn't believe. You would have a nap every day, but you wouldn't like lay down or anything. You would just lean forward and put your head on the on the table, and you would have a nap for like 30 minutes plus or minus
well,
a minute,
well,
and you wouldn't set the alarm, nothing.
I got more sophisticated after you left. I got a sofa,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
put it in my office, and I would just tell my secretary, Joe Haynes, that I was going to rest. This would be after I ran or swam, and after I'd had a bite of lunch. I knew that I'd be more productive. Yeah, I'd be more productive if I rested for 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
I could do that. I was kind of conditioned. I'd look at my watch and I'd say, well, I want to wake up in 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, and I'd feel like I'd been asleep for an hour.
It's amazing.
And
I thought it was 30, but you literally just, I remember you would just be you'd be sitting like I am now with your head on the table. Straight down.
But I learned that I would be more productive if I took a rest, kind of cleared the circuits.
I think that gives a bit of an idea of your work ethic, because people say, oh, half an hour nap. I'm like, what? If I'm having a nap, it's like an hour or something. You were 10 minutes. You were 10 minutes.
Yeah, you take an hour nap, the afternoon is over.
All right. So I'm looking at our list here. So we've gone temperature regulation a bit, fluid balance. Yeah, so that was the classic thing, like you'd say, if you lost more than 2% of your body weight, it would affect your performance.
Yeah.
So your muscle glycogen. Sorry, you go.
Well, it begins to affect temperature regulation. So, if your blood volume drops, you have less blood to circulate, and the skin needs a lot if you're in warm conditions. So the end result is that, all of that work together. That's why we did all of those studies. That was in the early 70s, I think, primarily. And
then I think it was later you had the classic, as you mentioned, muscle glycogen. You had the classic glycogen when you did day after day. You'd have glycogen, you exercise, it would stay, it would go back and forth and stay fine with cycling. But then with running, it would tend to go down with, and you'd say it was the muscle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That was, I think later on, I worked with Per Bloom and Lars Hermansen in Oslo, Norway. And we did those same studies, but we did them on a treadmill.
Yep.
And that was where Per found that you don't, in a 24-hour rest period, even though you're getting carbohydrates, you don't resynthesize. So, and what that led us to was to look at the inflammatory response that you get from running, the trauma to the muscle and running that you don't get when you're cycling.
Yeah.
So, and that inflammatory response ended up being detrimental for glycogen resynthesis.
So, well, that was kind of around, because I remember Jeff Woodrick. We were good buddies. It was always Jeff Woodrick, Kathy, who's my wife, and she just came and said hello before we started.
Yeah.
We used to hang out together. So remember we did that eccentric. There was one before Jeff Woodrick as well. You did the eccentric exercise and looked at the glycogen resynthesis was reduced. Now tell us about that story when you did 10 sets of 10. So your first study when you did the eccentric exercise, you did 10 sets of 10.
We did a number of eccentric exercise regimens, but doing those, one of the guys that we used was Danny Cortland. Do you remember that name?
I just remember the story. I don't remember the name.
Well, anyway, we'd do those sets, and which would drive the lactate levels really high, and the hydrogen ion concentration would get so high that guys, after they'd quit, they'd get sick.
Okay.
And Danny, we knew every day he was going to go throw up right outside the trailers.
He must have been, because I was not there for that first one. I was there for the second or third one when Jeff Wedrick was looking at the glycogen synthesis. The story I'm thinking about is how by the time Jeff Wedrick did it, they were like, let's not do 10 sets of 10 because of the guy who ended up in the wheelchair. That's what I was thinking about, that story.
Oh, you're thinking of, actually, I thought we were doing eccentric exercise using one leg.
Okay.
Yeah, and the guy got compartmental syndrome.
Mm-hmm. And his brother was a lawyer. I heard about this.
No, he wasn't a lawyer.
I thought you had to I thought his brother was a lawyer, and he said, if you don't push me around to all my lectures, we're going to sue you. These stories must get so out of whack.
Well, I don't remember that story, so.
I was told that the guy was in a wheelchair from the muscle damage, and his brother was a lawyer, and they were like, you need to get this Dr. Costill to take you to all your lectures and drive you home and pick you up, or we're going to sue him.
Oh yeah, that was Jeff Grabman. I don't know his Grabman. Yeah, and he got us the baby because we were worried because it was a fairly serious problem because Dave Pearson was involved and he had overdone it. He just had done way too much damage to the muscle, I think. Okay. And he got a compartmental syndrome. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was I lost a little sleep on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few stories around there.
Speaking of Dave Pearson, he just died yesterday.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
He died yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah. Sorry, man.
Yeah. But another soul.
Oh. He wasn't anyway. He was younger than.
Oh no, he was 60.
Yeah.
Oh maybe. Oh maybe no.
70 something.
Yeah, he's 7.
Holy crap. Sorry, man. I didn't know if you guys kept close.
No,
No, we could have put it off if you're okay. Yeah.
No.
I was saying before, I think we were off air, you're sharp as a tack. You keep on top of this stuff better than I am.
I just wish my muscles didn't disappear.
Well, why don't we talk about your swimming? Because you know what? Again, I've got stories. So remember, you used to get the Ball State swim team in the lab, and you would have the swim bench, and you'd lay on the swim bench. So I guess I worked it out. You were like 54 or 56 then or something. You'd lay on the swim bench, and put the paddles, and you just smash it out, and then you'd put your numbers up on the board, and you say, if any of you guys can beat this, something, and they never could. They couldn't do it. Well, not when I was there.
Well,
I know it's partly technique, though. You did point that out at one stage.
Yeah, part of it had to be plus arm length because I have reasonably long arms, so you get a longer pull through. Okay. I couldn't beat them in the pool, but
well, that was pretty impressive, though. You blew them away on the swim bench. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah. Well, I trained with the swimming team when I first started in. And I don't know if you remember, but we had a swimming coach, Bob Thomas. And Bob would let us do all kinds of research with his team. Okay. We did.
Oh, absolutely. Because you took them like one day of training. This is the thing you touched on earlier. You said about rather than doing heaps of volume with your runners, you were doing like one day. And that was the big thing when I was there, because you were taking them. They had 2 days a week. They were swimming twice a day, and you were saying there's no need to do this much volume. Yeah. And so you managed to convince them that half the team did one a day and half the team 2 a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many coaches has let you use the team the way we did. We do all kinds of stuff. looking at detraining, tapering. I think through the whole middle and last part of the 80s, he would basically turn the team over to us. And we could, we didn't interfere with their fitness, but we were able to do all kinds of tapering studies, do muscle biopsies on them, looking at shaving down. We had lots of good experiments that.
Well, again, I think it was a testament to you. Obviously, he thought you were value adding, or he wouldn't have had you doing it.
No, he and I were very good friends, and he just retired recently.
He wasn't a runner though. I thought your friends are only runners.
Well, he ran when he first came as a swimming coach. He would run at noon with us, and I think
you got to be a runner to be in the good books. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but then my knees started bothering me in 83, 82, and that's when I went back to swimming, because I'd been a swimmer in college, and had competed, fairly successiously till I was about 21.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to work out. How are you so good later on? So no modesty here. So how good were you at, when you were younger? Like, I'm just trying to work out how you ended up.
I would probably have been in the top 5%, as a freestyle. I placed third in the nationals at 100 butterfly.
Third in the nationals is slightly better than 5%, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
you're not a mathematician when it comes to that.
That was all, but there's a story behind that, because I was very mediocre all through my senior year in college. And when I swam my last meet in a conference competition, I got second or third place. And so that wasn't very good, but I got invited to go to the nationals at Yale. But I decided before, when I swam the last conference race, I decided I quit. I'm not going to swim anymore. So I didn't swim. But I had entered a meet in Cleveland, and I went untrained and hadn't trained in almost 3 or 4 weeks. I went to the meet and I went 3 seconds faster than I had done in
so this is the beginning of your three-week taper, was it? The swimming.
Exactly. But that was in the era when nobody tapered.
Wow.
Nobody knew anything about it. Suddenly I go 3 seconds faster. I go, there's something's got to be going on. Wow. And so we went to nationals, and I swam extremely well. But throughout my entire research career, I always had a lingering question, why did I go better when I didn't train? And so it wasn't until probably the period when I started working with Bob Fixx, doing muscle biopsy work and looking at tapering, that I realized what was really happening. That's why tapering became so popular, is because people began realizing that you have to take away the stress. And what Scott actually showed, I think maybe in his dissertation, was that you get a shift in fiber distribution when you taper.
That quickly. Wow.
Yeah, within about 3 weeks, you can get the change, and so you get what swimmers call easy speed. I mean, it's like, you're not swimming that hard, but you're going fast. And a lot of it's just you get the explosive, I guess, the 2x fibers back.
So you literally get a change. You get more 2x in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because yeah, I'd have to look at all the numbers, but there's a definite change.
Well, he was talking about, when he came on talking about space, he was talking about how you get changes in fiber type, and like, we tended to think it wasn't that you couldn't really shift it much, but yeah, he was saying it can change quite quickly in space.
Yeah, that was the original idea, that you're fixed and it doesn't change. But then we noticed that when we did the 25-year follow-up study, Scott's first study, that all those guys that had 80% slow twitch now have 55.
Wow.
So there's a big change. Even Amby Burfoot and others were all down with a mixed.
So even the ones that kept running, you're talking about the ones that kept running as well, yeah?
Yeah, but they weren't training like they had
of course. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
do you have a feel for that? Because I'm sure you've thought about it as you're getting older. Do you have a feel for the classic thing, like people's VO2 max and their performance and then goes down with age? Do you have a feel for, obviously you're going to get slower and you've been fighting it, I'm sure, but you can slow it a lot by training, obviously.
Well, you're losing a lot of those really explosive fibers. And so things that feel like they ought to be fast aren't fast. So there's a definite change.
You're losing those fast motor units and they sprout, they go on to the slow, so you get more slow. Yeah.
I don't know that there's that much shift. I think there's some fiber loss as well, because I know we've looked at DEXA readings. You know what DEXA is?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
Test me out. Dual X-ray absorptometry.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Dual emission X-ray. Anyway, DEXA. So for people to know, you can measure your body composition. People often use it for bone and fat mass and things.
But now you can differentiate fat and lean tissue and as well as bone. So we've followed me over the last 20 years.
Okay.
And I can tell you that my body weight mass has not changed. So I weigh the same as I always weigh. My bone density and skeleton's unchanged.
Wow.
The fat has increased a bit, and muscle mass has gone down dramatically. So
which is interesting, which is fair enough. The first thing I thought, though, which is interesting, is your bone mass hasn't changed because you're not really doing weight bearing. You're swimming, right?
But I have very dense bones. I have small bones, but they're quite dense. I'm about 3 standard deviations above the norm.
Wow.
So I have I've broken a few bones, but probably should have broken more. Yeah.
So tell me, this taper. So was anyone tapering? Was it just the odd person tapering here and there, or no?
No one was tapering at that time.
No one was.
And tapering. So it was not until before competition, you didn't do anything the day before the race, but you didn't have a prolonged period where you reduced training. And it wasn't until, much later that tapering actually took place.
Well, good.
And,
so you got onto that one as well. And tell me
we did studies looking at tapering, and I found that by the time I started studying them, Bob Thomas was already using the taper technique, where he would slowly decrease the workload, and that would end up with about a 4% improvement in performance, as opposed to what they were doing before.
So this is you dropping the volume and but having some intensity, but
then
dropping the volume.
Yeah, but then I played around with that, and I noticed that you didn't have to slowly decrease it. you could drop it right down to only do about a third of the normal training load, and it would you get the same taper effect. So there's no question.
Do you need to add the intent? Because people would drop the volume and add intensity, but you did nothing for 3 weeks. So do you actually need to do that?
Well, they trained, but the load, they do a few sprints, but that'd be it. Not a lot. Yeah. The idea was not to hurt the guy, and exactly. So the idea was to back off pretty much completely.
So tell me your swimming. So you ended up, you took 3 weeks off and you did really well at nationals, but then
I quit.
It was like much later. Yeah, you quit, and then you came back. Now, because I remember looking at the record books, and you were like, when you're 55 to 60, you had like 10 national records in the US, and then you went up to 60 to 65, and then you took all those records, and 65 to 70. I mean, how the hell? I could have like 10 records, and then you had a world record for the medley. Or something.
Well, you gotta remember, I was aging at the same rate that my competition. So if I beat them all at 60,
yeah, that's true.
I'd be expected to beat them at 70.
That's true.
So that's kind of probably the best. Actually, my best times were always when I was in about 47 or 48. As a matter of fact, when I was 47, I ran a lifetime best marathon and swam my best times, much better than I did in college.
Wow, 47. So what were they? Just for the statisticians at home.
Yeah, well, I'd stayed fit over all those years because I ran. And so when I started swimming, I was awful. For about a year, for 3 or 4 months, I was terrible. But then I slowly started getting the feel and everything back. And within a year, I could equal what I had done when I was 21.
Wow.
And then I just got better for 3 years. I got much better, so that by the time I was 50, I was swimming 7 seconds faster per 200 meters than I had swum when I was 21.
Wow.
And if you know anything about swimming, that's a lot of distance.
I'm crap at swimming. I can't relate. I just flail around in there.
It'd be like I would have beaten myself by almost 3/4 of a pool length.
Wow. Okay.
So it was huge. And
so can you tell me your best times? Your 100 and just roughly.
Well, at 100 meters, when I was 50 years old, I went 59 seconds.
That's quick.
Well, relatively.
That much.
Now they're going like low 40s, 41, 42 seconds. So I mean, it's not comparable. But strength is so key.
And what was your butterfly you were good at? What was your 100 butterfly time out of interest? Or 200?
Well, for 100 meters, I think my best was 104, wow. A minute and 4 seconds. But when I was in college, I was going like 113.
I remember seeing your times, like, because when I looked at your national records and things, 60 or 65, it was like 106.7 or something for 100 when you were like 60 or something, 65. It was crazy.
Well, that might have been yards.
Oh, it might have been yards.
Yeah, it might be yards. I don't know exactly. I know, I started being more competitive when I was I was competitive right right from the start. I was maybe one of the top 5 swimmers when I was 48 to 50. And then by the time I was 60, relative to the age group I was in, I'd moved up to the top, and I think I stayed there. Now I've continued to compete until last year.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, but the times and the strength loss, it's terrible. It gets to the point where it's embarrassing.
So you mean even though you're still like probably the best in the country, you just don't, it
Well,
doesn't feel good anymore, or yeah,
for guys 85 and over, I mean,
exactly.
well, it's all relative, I guess.
But you would have like the top, you would be winning 10 events at the nationals for your age group. That's what I saw.
Well, you can only swim 6, but I generally would win all of them. When I was 80, I think I've won everything at nationals. But
it's just
it's
ridiculous. All right, but hang on. But what about the world record? So you have a world? Do you still have? You had a world record for the medley, I think.
I think I have, or I did. No, I think one or two of them have been broken. I think last year, I think I still held maybe 4
world records.
Yeah.
Holy crap. So, you know, a great line you said to me, and I've said to people, and I've thought it myself over the years as well, is how you were like, what were you? Oh, yeah, it was when you came to VU and swam in the pool. You were 78. And you said, I can't wait to turn 80 so I can kick those old butts. So I can kick those old butts. And that's the good thing, because, you know, as you get older, it's a bit of a bummer, but you can go, oh, I'm going up into a, you know, like a slot.
Well, there are times when I think that aging is a competition. Last man standing wins.
All right.
I doubt that I'll be the last man standing, but
Wow.
it's worth a try.
So I didn't realize you stopped competing last year, but as we mentioned earlier, Scott Trappy said, and you mentioned that you still go down to the pool and you do the same work Monday, Wednesday.
Yeah,
Friday.
I did the same. I do the same training. I'm not gonna go to competition because there's hardly anybody still swimming at this age.
I see.
I can just time myself in the pool because it's always been me against the clock. So
that's true.
So
nothing's changed.
I can look through that. Yeah.
So and did you actually say you do the same training? So if he's doing 4 200s or whatever, you do the same?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we set the rest interval such that he'll finish several seconds ahead of me. But I can almost see the decay with aging. The loss in strength has been very dramatic since I was 80. I've noticed.
That's
Up until the time, I felt like I could go hard and still hold good technique and all of that.
That's interesting because they often talk about 70. I think John Faulkner talks about strength sort of drops off a bit naturally until 70, and then it drops off a lot. But you found like 80 was something.
Yeah, I think I could attest to that. I mean, I could within a year or two of right before I turned 85, I could still do some respectable times, but within a year or two, I could just see the time going by fast.
Wow, that's interesting because that's making me feel like a real wimp. Because I remember telling people, so I'd be riding bikes because I was always injured from running, like yourself. And I remember telling on bikes and said, something happened when I turned 50. Something happened when I turned 50. You haven't turned 50 yet. And you're like talking about 80, 85.
Well, it does. I think between 65 and 70, I could see striking difference. And each age group, I could see remarkable decrements in performance, but it's been really noticeable almost month by month.
Oh, you should almost
Now,
publish that. I reckon that would be great because you know, that would be quite interesting just to see that data, because you've obviously watched it very closely and you've tried to train the same.
Well, there are a number of competitors still in my age group, and they all complain equally that it's very dramatic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by that. But the amazing thing is that you've kept it up throughout. So I think it'd be really interesting to see your data.
Well, it takes self-discipline.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of times I don't want to go, but I've gotten in the mood as long as Scott and the other guys are going to train. And we train the same, we do pretty much the same workouts. Monday, we do repeat 100s. On Wednesday, we do repeat 50s. And then on Friday, we do 25s sprints. You're having trouble with the sunshine.
Yeah, the light keeps moving everywhere.
Well, you keep back
so you're literally doing the same, because I thought you were saying, like, you know, you're doing the same workout, but he's like doing his own thing. You're literally doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
We'll do the hundreds. We'll do one every 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and we'll do 10 of them. And then when we do 50s, we do 20 50s, one every minute and 15 seconds.
Wow. Okay.
And then 25s, we do 40 of them on 40 seconds.
Holy mackerel.
So we do them all together, which is great.
Which is great. Which is actually amazing. Now, how is your health? I mean, you know, it sounds like your heart and everything must be going along.
Yeah, I've had some atrial fib problems.
Okay.
And I've pretty much had that under control. I've had it for maybe 15 years. And it's been pretty controlled until maybe a couple of weeks ago. I had a couple bouts, but it cleared up. That's about the only issue I've had that I can think of. I attributed a lot of good health to staying physically active.
Oh yeah.
And I think mentally as well as physically.
Oh, you're sharp attack. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. My long-term memory seems very good. I mean, I can picture things, you know, from when I was a teenager. So I've been fortunate that because my mother and her siblings all developed dementia.
Okay.
And so I feel fortunate that I have kept, you know, long-term and short-term memory.
So no blood pressure, cholesterol.
No.
Wow.
I think with statins, I've been on a statin for years and years.
Okay.
Bill Fink and I used to chase that boogeyman for.
I remember you guys talking about. I remember Bill Fink was always taking an aspirin. He was big into having an aspirin every day. And all
yeah. Well, I use an anticoagulant because of the atrial fib.
Okay.
By the way, Bill is going to be 90 this year.
Wow. He's an old bloke. He's an old bloke. He's the old bloke in the team. So, okay. So looking through, we had dot points to talk about. So with the research, muscle pH and bicarbonate, why don't we keep, what were we going to say something about that? The work you did on that, of course, was.
Oh, well, the bicarbonate stuff, you know, I was just probing when Rick Sharp was here and others. We were doing looking at muscle and blood pH. My primary interest was in seeing some way to buffer the hydrogen in swimming, because it's highly anaerobic.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, other people had done studies with bicarbonate, but from what I'd been looking at, it looked to me like it might help performance in repeated bouts.
Mm-hmm.
So, we did studies, and one of the studies I think that I liked the best was one where I took the swimming team and broke them into 2 groups. And we did, I think, 10 50s all out.
Mm-hmm.
And one group got a bicarbonate and the other group got a placebo.
Yep.
And each swimmer did both a placebo and an experimental trial twice. Okay. And they didn't know what they were getting.
Yep.
By the time we did the second trial, I knew, I mean, I didn't know either, but I could figure it out very quickly who was on what, because they'd all be very good for about the first 5 or 6. And then the last 2 or 3, the ones that were on bicarbonate, would really accelerate. They could do far better. And that became very obvious. But then I also knew that it doesn't work if it's just a continuous work bout.
Just
high intensity one, it doesn't work. And from the readings and stuff that I looked at, it looked to me like the bicarbonate stays extracellular outside the cell. But what it does is it facilitates the hydrogen to get out of the cell. And then you can buffer it through respiration or the bicarbonate does. So, which explained the confusion that existed. Yeah.
So would it be best for training then? If you wanted to just train harder, it'd be better rather than for a race?
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about using it as a training aid, because you could probably go harder, longer, and repeat sets, but I'm not sure that would necessarily benefit you that much more.
Yeah. Just keep it simple, probably.
Yeah.
All right. So then we've mentioned Bob Fixx a couple of times. So we've been heading towards, I guess, some of the single fiber stuff you did with NASA, the astronaut stuff. And,
well, Bob and I, he ran for me in the early years, and but we stayed in touch. He'd gone on, got a doctoral degree, became a muscle physiologist. But we'd stayed in contact and he had been studying primates and sending them up in the space station, and which was great. But then NASA decided no more primate work. So Bob, had to have another primate source. So he asked me if he could get muscle from the swimmers.
Okay.
So, and he was doing single fiber physiology, and this was in 1989, and he wanted to apply for a grant to study the astronauts that would go up on the space shuttle. And so I collaborated with him, and that's when we got started. He studied the swimmers, and it was probably the first muscle biopsies are looking at single fibers on swimmers. Wow. And we were looking at overload training, and but I got started with him. I didn't understand what the hell he was doing, And and Scott came along shortly after that, or during that period, and I figured, like everything else, if I wanted to find out about it, I needed to have somebody go watch Bob. And so that's when I sent Scott to go study with Fixx. And I don't know how long, I was there for a couple months off and on. And he came back, and then I had the grant money, and I bought all the equipment to get him set up. And Fixx helped us with all of that, gave us access to all his resources. And so Scott then learned the technique, and he subsequently taught other people how to do it. But we continued, and we did the space shuttle project.
Your influence goes beyond even people that studied with you, because Bob Fixx didn't actually study with you, but he was coached by you, right? And then he ended up being, single author, papers on muscle fatigue, journal, reviews, the big name in muscle fatigue. So so what was that like working with? Well, I already spoke to Scott Trappy about it, but that must have been fun working with the astronauts.
Oh yeah, Scott and I swear that we're going to sit down one day and tell the stories, because we had a lot of stories and a lot of experiences that were great. But yeah, it was good. I mean, we got to know the crew, and go to dinner and drink with them, and so it was a lot of time spent going to Houston.
Wow, Houston! I was amazed how quickly so Scott would say within an hour or two you'd biopsy them when they got back.
Oh yeah, we even the first flight that I think one of the first flights that we had to do. The crew came, no, that's not, I'm thinking of another flight. We had astronauts that would go up and come back and land in Russia. And Elder Scott told you about that, but we would have to go over and wait for them to be transported from Siberia to Star City, which is outside Moscow. And then we would biopsy them. So we do them before they went up. They'd be up there for 4 to 6 months. And then they'd come back and we biopsy them again. Mm-hmm. And we did the same thing with the shuttle crew. But Scott's probably told you all of that. So
bits and pieces. Yeah, bits and pieces. Well, I hope you weren't actually involved with any of the ones that the two that died. The Challenger. No. So that would have been pretty horrific. So I see on your list also you've got atrophy, bear hibernation. What's the
bear hibernation? Well, the reason we were studying the astronauts was that weightlessness creates muscle atrophy when you unload it for long periods. And so I just got to brainstorming one time, and I thought, well, if you really want to study what happens with inactivity, it seems to me that a hibernating animal would be the way to go, because a bear it goes into hibernation for about 4 or 5 months. It doesn't urinate, doesn't defecate, doesn't eat.
Wow. Yeah.
And doesn't lose any muscle.
Okay.
So I thought, well, studying bears would be the way to go. So
They don't lose any muscle. I had no idea. I thought they'd be churning through everything. So it's just fat they churn through, is it?
Well, it turns out other researchers have shown that the bear is able to recycle the nitrogen.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the reason they don't continue to produce urine. They're recycling.
Genius.
And so they probably lose a little muscle, because they lose a good sized amount of fat during hibernation, but they're able to maintain their muscle strength. As a matter of fact, we had to go into the forest up in Wisconsin and to trap them and get, tranquilize them, then haul them out, weigh them, do surgeries on them, get muscle, and do all kinds of muscle stuff, including single fiber stuff. But the interesting
I'm assuming
thing
you
was,
weren't the one running around trapping them and things. You must have had an expert on that. I'm assuming you weren't the one running around trapping bears. You must have had an expert on that.
No. We were able to get the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources guys, to actually trap the bears. And that was always a lot of fun, because you're out tramping around in the forest, and the bears are in these great big enclosures, so you trap them. So
you would anesthetize them, or they would, or who would do what?
Well, these DNR guys would
they knew what to do there.
Yeah, and then our job was just to get tissue. But so we had to make many trips. So
what did you find there? What did you find with that?
Well, we did produce one fairly long, complex publication on it. And I guess the single fiber stuff, I'm not quite sure what was really found. I mean, we basically found that their muscle losses were certainly small, and their fat losses were sizable. But during that period, most of these that we trapped were females, and the females would have had cubs during the winter. And so when we would locate them, they'd be asleep, and we'd have to tranquilize them and then remove the cubs and hold them while we did the surgery on them again. And then put the cubs back and reposition her and let her wake up. But the first one we trapped, she had 5 cubs, which is a lot for a bear. Usually they have 1 or 2. So so that was a good experience. We enjoyed the whole process.
Well, this has been amazing chat. I do want to get back to, I want to ask you about your hobbies, but I've got a couple of people that sent through questions on Twitter. Hi, Joseph. First time I went to ACSM conference, Baltimore, 1998. David Costill gave the Wolf Memorial Lecture and said something I always remember. Every once in a while, 2 or 3 months in the lab can save you an hour in the library.
Well, I probably did say that, but
that's funny.
Just the experience of hands-on involvement in the lab teaches you so much. And I think that's the one thing I probably enjoyed the most, was just being in the lab. It was always like being in a candy store.
I just remember something, because we'd often be participants in the studies. I remember you biopsied me. Well, my first biopsy was by you, of course. But I remember one, I couldn't believe it. You'd always make it, you'd be lighthearted about it. So you'd come in and you'd say, "Oh, where are my glasses?" So, just sort of joking that you couldn't find the leg or something. But then you did one, I couldn't believe it. I thought you were joking, because you'd often joke around. You were getting ready to biopsy me, and you said, "We're done." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, right, yeah." And you actually had done it. I just didn't feel it. I'll never forget that.
Well, the biopsy, I always said, looked 100% worse than it actually having it done. And that's why I always had a standing rule that you couldn't watch one unless you'd had one done.
Exactly. Wow, because that's probably continued on in so many labs because we'd always do the same thing. And I didn't realize.
Well, I would hope so. Because I think
yeah,
the key to doing human physiology research is the bedside manner. You know, you've got to have the subject relaxed, and you can't try to minimize the apprehension of them being a subject. And you know what Scott's doing now is far more complex and invasive than anything we did. So you know,
is that the fat biopsies or?
Yeah, the fat biopsies and still doing the muscle biopsies. They're taking a lot more muscle than we did.
Yeah, I remember how different it was as well because, you know, later on I was measuring AP kinase and things like that. We had to get it like really quickly. So I remember with you, we were just measuring like glycogen often. So the person would finish exercise, you know, be timed to exhaustion or something. And then we'd say, oh, okay, yep. And we'd go and knock on the door, Dave, and you'd be on the phone or something. And it'd be like, and it wouldn't matter. It was just
Time to
glycogen.
do the biopsy.
Yeah, exactly. But like we got it down to like 8 seconds. This guy, Ben Kenny, that I had doing our biopsies, we'd actually have them, they'd be riding, then we'd unclip their pedals and they'd still ride. And then you get them to lean back and put their leg up on the handlebars.
Yeah.
It'd be 8 seconds from when they stopped until when it was frozen. So a bit different. Okay, this guy Michaelis, can't help thinking of the Michaelis constant. Michaelis, any question about the importance or role of exercise physiology books nowadays? I'm not sure what he's thinking there. I guess it's, you know, the books are probably out of date by the time they're published compared to just, not sure what he's thinking there.
You know, I think the textbooks, you know, our book is still on the market, but and it does very well. But I think the cost of the book these days is, you know, very inhibitive. But I think there's still a place for a textbook. Online learning, probably, I don't know whether it's as good or not, but I still would argue that if you want to have an exercise physiology experience, the best way is somehow get involved with actually measuring your own physiology. By the way, about 3 days ago, I did a max treadmill test.
Oh, you
Can
did?
You guess what my max is now?
You did a VO2 max on a treadmill.
Yeah.
Oh, golly. I don't know where to.
Well, you know my age.
30?
Huh? 27. 27. So, and when I was at my best, I was only about 55. So I'm half the man I was.
Half the man.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
My max heart rate now is only 120.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I'm working out, if I hit 110, that's about it. So it gives you an idea.
Wow. So that's even less than 220 minus your age. I know that's just a rough, because you always had a low max heart rate, I guess. So
no, not really. But I think I did have an ablation, and I'm wondering if that may have somehow remodeled the heart to some degree. Yeah.
Huh. Hey, someone else sent a Twitter a photo. I asked people if they had questions, you know, on Twitter, and one person, Kevin Renshaw, just sent a photo of your book, Swimming, Costill.
Oh yeah,
McGlesko and Richardson.
Yeah, Ernie McGlesko and Richardson.
Yeah. Cool. So how's that? Are they still going around? Are you updating those, or are they kind of old?
No,
they must be old versions.
No, we did that book, but Ernie McGlesko who's really the guru of swimming technique, had his own book out, and that has continued. But that book we wrote for the International Olympic Committee.
Yeah, I saw it on the cover. Yes.
Yeah.
So when was that? Yeah, I've heard of Ernie Briscoe. What am I talking about? When was that?
I don't know. It must have been in the early 90s. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a classic. When I looked you up, looking for photos and everything, one of the things that came up was inside running. And here I was thinking I thought for once I've come up with something novel, inside exercise. And then I see you had a book, called Inside Running. Like, I probably, but maybe subconsciously I was,
Well, I probably that book, Inside Running, was probably the most popular over the years. I think it attracted a number of students to the lab.
Yeah.
I think Hargraves has mentioned to me before that he read that book and decided that's what he wanted to do.
Wow. Yeah, literally I thought inside exercise. And then I was like, David Costill was ahead of me. Like I was probably subconsciously thinking of your book. Now, hobbies. Now, surely a hobby has to be swimming, but I guess it's more lifestyle. But you've sent through a few hobbies. One I know of. Tell me about your aeronautics. So you've got your own license to fly.
Yeah. So when the year before I retired, I knew that I would need something challenging. So I decided that with some encouragement from a friend, decided to get my pilot's license. And so it took me about 7 months probably of training and taking all the textbook training as well to get my license. And in the process, they kept selling the airplane out from under me. I'd be ready to do my solo flight, and next thing I know, they sell the airplane. Well, it's not like you just jump in any airplane. You'd have to have the feel for the plane. So I finally decided in the midst of my training that I would just buy an airplane. So I bought the plane, and then I had it for about 4 years and got all the instrument ratings and all that, so I could fly, in inclement weather, IFR. And so
that worries me. Are you still allowed to fly? It sounds scary, flying a plane.
Yeah,
you might crash.
It was a challenge, and very exhausting. As a matter of fact, you'd be surprised how tired you get because you're so focused for a short period of time. But after about 4 years of flying, and I did a lot of flying, I decided that I wanted to build an airplane.
Wow.
So I knew a couple guys who had built planes. So I bought a kit plane from a place in Oregon, and it took me 2 years to build the airplane.
Holy crap!
But it was great. It was like riding a rocket. I mean, it was so fast. So I really enjoyed that, and I flew that for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 5 years.
So they send you a kit. Is it like IKEA? They send you a kit and you put it together.
Well, it's not partially built. It's all pretty much in pieces, but you have to do a lot of the designing and wiring, and I mean, it's a real task. And then, of course, when you're all done building, you have to test fly it. So
See
the
if you
first
screwed
time,
up or not.
the first time you take it up could be the
Yeah.
last time.
Oh man.
So anyway, but it turned out to be a great airplane, and it was
Oh.
very, very fast. It would cruise normally at about 250 miles an hour.
Wow.
So it would get me to Wisconsin fast.
Can I get a bit rude question maybe? How much does it cost to get a kit? How much does a plane cost?
An airplane at that point, that probably cost me total, which included the engine and all the parts and pieces and tools and everything. That probably cost me about $65,000.
Okay.
So it wasn't cheap.
And if you bought the same plane already put together, what would it be like, roughly?
Oh, well, that plane would cost it would have cost about 135,000.
Wow. So it's
Yeah.
half the price. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, then, about 2009, I decided that I liked the process of building the airplane. So I decided to sell that airplane and build a new one. So I built a second airplane. And I had that until I gave up flying, which was 2020.
Okay.
So just
recently.
4 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah.
And did you make the same plane or did you make a different plane?
No, I built a different one.
I was thinking you would do that. You'd like that challenge. I was thinking that.
Yeah. It was good, but it's an overwhelming task. You can imagine if you sat back and looked at it, you go, there's no way I'm going to build that. And then there's no way I'm going to fly it.
Well, there's no way to even order it. There's no way to even do it. Maybe I need to challenge myself more. So you did 1,100 hours you've done flying, yeah?
Yeah.
How much?
I probably would have flown more if I had more places I wanted to go.
So where did you fly? How far could you fly with it?
I flew, west. I probably flew beyond Branson, Missouri, which is beyond the Mississippi River. And I flew to south to Florida and east to Washington, D.C. And north. I never went into Canada. I flew to Wisconsin probably 50 times.
So could you do in one shot like 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers or something?
I could only do probably about 3 to 4 hours, and then I'd have to get fuel.
Oh, so when you went to Florida, you'd have to stop and fuel up again.
Oh yeah, a couple times.
Or maybe they'd come along next to you and refuel, like they do.
No, I wasn't that sophisticated.
I'm sure you were. All right.
No.
And then you restore classic cars as well. So you are a handyman.
Yeah, that's the reason I was willing to undertake an airplane, because I had been restoring old cars.
I see.
Corvettes and Thunderbirds.
Wow. So you don't jump straight from IKEA to an airplane. You were restoring cars first. Makes sense.
Yeah, I had mechanical skills to do all that stuff. So, or if I didn't, I knew somebody that did.
So do you fix them up and sell them, or do you have like a 7 in your garage or something?
I ended up probably losing money on all that stuff, but I enjoyed the mechanical aspect of it.
Wow.
So.
All right. Well, I could talk to you all day. Usually I started off, I used to do like, I try and make them like an hour, and then I've started thinking, I'm having fun. I'm just going to keep going. And this one I could just keep going forever if you're okay. But
good heavens, we've been talking that long?
I think more than 2 hours, yeah. So this will be the record. Huh?
It's time for me to have a rum and Coke. So
A rum and Coke.
So we're gonna have to give it up.
Have a medicinal drink. Well,
yeah.
Hey, it's fantastic. Obviously, fantastic. I've been looking forward, as I said at the start.
I'm not sure I said anything worthwhile, but It's been fun talking to you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, you said a lot of worthwhile things. It's fantastic talking to you, David. Or I always say David somehow. It should be, we used to call you Doc. Yeah, Doc.
Yeah.
Or Dave, but I've become more, as you get older, I get more formal or something.
Well, there were good years in the lab.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed all of it.
Oh yeah.
So,
Remember you used to give those awards out.
oh
You
yeah.
remember the award you gave me? You probably don't remember that one.
Did I give you the Hans Costill Award? I still have that award. I forget what I gave you.
No, it was the
Probably
Isaac.
the Environmental Champion Award or something.
That's another story. It was the Isaac Newton Award because the load bike, I dropped the controller box thing. Remember how the load bike could have the controller on the front? It was Hiro Tanaka and I were like moving it.
No.
It fell and crashed. So you gave me the Isaac Newton Award for discovering gravity. But what's the Hans?
Discovering gravity.
What's the Hans Costill? What was that one again? I don't know. All right, mate.
Well, we had one who you didn't know, Abe Katz. Did you?
The Golden Fork Award.
Yeah. I heard from Abe not too long ago.
I didn't know.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Is he okay with that? I didn't know if I should bring that up or not. Maybe we don't tell people what that was about. Okay, mate.
That's another story.
That is another story. Okay.
What's really been great is I've been able to keep in touch with a lot of our old lab buddies. So
well, you know, it's
good
funny
to see you.
The first 15 years or something, I never emailed you because I thought, Dave, he's too important, he's too busy and whatever. So I didn't want to do it. And then the last 10 years or whatever, we've been, my dog's dreaming about something. He's like, he was making funny noises. The last 10 years or something, we've been great, great communicating. I've loved it.
Well, I've never lost track of you.
Yeah. I've never lost track of you, man. Okay. Well, great to see you.
Yeah, say hi to Kathy again.
I will. Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please like, subscribe, pass it on to your friends and colleagues. Check out the other podcasts. Thanks again.